it is never too late to build muscle strength. You can build muscle strength at any age. It's great news, but also a little bit simplistic and could come across a bit patronizing from me. So I wanted to use this short episode of the Never Told to Live podcast just to let you know I do recognize that when you are getting started with strength training, particularly if you've never really done it before and you are in your 50s, 60s and beyond, that age does bring along with it several things that may create a challenge and a barrier to you getting started and being able to progress. Before I do, I just wanted to remind you that next week is the live Q&A podcast session. So it's going to be on Wednesday, the 4th of June at 12 o'clock. I'm going to be live streaming on YouTube and doing this whole episode live for you to come and ask questions. If you can't make it but still want to ask a question, then please do leave a comment below or send me an email. It's chris@nevertoldtolive.com. I will pick up that question and I will try and answer that in the next episode, which again, Wednesday, 4th of June at 12 o'clock. So let's talk about some of those barriers and challenges you might face if you're getting started later on in life. So the first one I wanted to talk about was limiting beliefs. There are several things that we have told ourselves, either individually or as a society, that we have believed to be true, and that gives us permission not to take those steps out of our comfort zone and not to try anything that, like strength and resistance training, because there might be an element of you saying, well, I didn't do it when I was younger. It's potentially a risky exercise form and I've left it too late to get started now. Or I've got a particular condition, I've got arthritic knee, I've got a bad back in the past, strength training is probably not a great idea, I'm not going to do it, I'll try something safer. And there's all these little narratives that we've told ourselves that have become our reality but aren't necessarily the truth. And I want to kind of give another way of looking at those. A nice analogy to limiting beliefs that I heard was on Stephen Bartlett's podcast. And he talked about this spider on a white bit of paper. And they drew with a black permanent marker a circle around the spider. And the spider would move around, move up to the line, turn around, try and find a different way. And it felt trapped by this line. And we know, looking at it, that line wasn't a barrier. There's no reason it would stop the spider from walking over it. But it had created this kind of barrier around itself. And it's similar to what we tend to do with some of these narratives that I discussed. We tend to feel like we've created a safe space within that barrier, and anything outside of it is maybe not a good idea or not a safe idea. And we don't necessarily grow or explore because we've created this defined barrier that we're stuck in. Now, interestingly, the spider, you see at one point its leg almost accidentally go over one of the black lines. And the moment that happened, you can see it realize that this line isn't anything to stop it. And it wandered out the line. And suddenly it's kind of this eye-opening moment that maybe the thing that we told ourselves isn't the real reason that we can't do it. And maybe there is another option. And then even more interestingly, they drew another circle around the spider once it stopped again. And then the spider just didn't pay any attention to that line. It carried on just walking all over the paper. So it couldn't then be trapped back by that black line again. And again, the same thing is true sometimes. Is once you've found one thing that maybe you realize was this limiting belief, and you've managed to step outside of that and realize there's nothing bad on the other side, you start to question other things that you might have told yourself that might not necessarily be true. And a nice example of that is someone that joined my course, Stronger for Life. And within the course, I suggest that people do some baseline tests to measure their progress. So they do them at the start, and then every 6 weeks, they repeat these tests. And one of them is one that you may have seen on social media before because it's been around a couple of times, of the sit-rise test. So you basically go from standing, try and sit down without using your hands. So you kind of end up in a cross-legged position and then stand back up again ideally without using your hands. And if you can do that without using your hands and without losing balance, you scored the perfect score of 10. And there's a whole scoring system to, if you use your knee on the floor, your hand on the floor, your elbow, there's a different point added for each point of contact on the way up and then again on the way sorry, on the way down, and then again on the way back up. Reason I'm talking about it is this person from the course, she had seen it go around on social media and just assumed that she couldn't do it. She never tried it. She just assumed that it wasn't something she was able to do, so she never tried. And then because I'd said on the course that we're going to do this every 6 weeks, she thought, well, I'm give it a go. I'm not expecting much. And to her shock, she managed to do it and scored the perfect score. And then she started to realize, well, if I told myself I couldn't do that and actually I did it perfectly, what else have I told myself I can't do? And a lot of that came back to her going back to a gym again. She just ruled out the fact she'd ever go back to a gym. And she joined the course only thinking she'd ever do the exercises from home and she'd only get to a certain point. But now she goes back to the gym. She even picks her hotels for her holidays based on the fact if they've got a gym or not, so she can continue her workouts. But it also allowed her to think bigger in terms of the weight she might be able to lift, because again, she told herself that she should only lift a certain level of weight with the dumbbells. And actually now she's doing barbells and it's progressed massively because she'd allowed herself to believe she could. So those limiting beliefs are a big one. So it's have a think about some of the limiting beliefs you might have that you might be able to question a little bit, and pop it in the comments below and let me know if you are watching this on YouTube, or send me an email if you're listening to the audio version of this. Next, we've got some negative experiences. So you might have tried to do some kind of gym-based exercise in the past or some other form of exercise and had some negative experience as a result of doing it. It could be that you caused yourself an injury or you had an old injury that flared up. And it's easy to tell yourself that I've tried it, it's not for me, again, I'm going to try something else. Or it might be that you try to use a personal trainer, and actually if you're someone who suffers with fatigue following menopause and you found that they didn't care to empathize with you at all on that, and that you felt dismissed by it and pushed even further, and actually you then find your fatigue levels skyrocketed the next couple of days and you just felt wiped out, then again, you're not going to want to go back, and you're not going to maybe want to go see a personal trainer because you think maybe they're all the same and you're going to have that same experience if you try again. And again, the more of these experiences you had, or the older you are, the more of these experiences you may well have had along the way that are going to kind of frame your vision of what might happen if I take another step out of my comfort zone and try again. So again, these are things that make it harder to get started. Then we've got certain physical restrictions. So that could be you might have had a previous frozen shoulder and never quite gained the full mobility back. Now that's going to make certain exercises harder, such as a shoulder press if you've got to get your arm right above your head. You might have knee pain, so whenever you go down into a squat, once you get to a certain depth, your knee starts to hurt. So again, these pains and aches that you have are there. They're going to make it harder, but it is possible to modify all the exercises around your knee pain or around that restricted shoulder, or there might be equipment you can use. So if you can't get your arms on a bar that's behind your back because your shoulder doesn't have the mobility, or maybe let's go for a leg press machine instead. Or you can get these what we call safety bars that have the bar behind you, but then they have these struts that come forwards over your shoulders, and your hands can hold those with your arms down by your side, and you haven't got to get your arm in an awkward position. So again, rather than ruling certain exercises out because of the mobility, there's just ways to adapt around it. So again, let's not rule out strength and resistance training as something that you can't do because of these narratives we've told ourselves. Let's find a way that we can take small steps and small modifications and adaptations to be able to make this a possibility. The other one, and I just did a webinar this morning on this, was about the impact that menopause has. And it's been my biggest learning curve over the last 5 or 6 years, is just how many things that come alongside menopause, or some of the symptoms that you might possibly be facing, that make the desire to want to go out and exercise really challenging and really sort of not pleasant at all. So fatigue is a big one I've mentioned slightly. Is if you are feeling fatigued before you've even stepped out the front door, the thought of going to the gym and exerting yourself further isn't something that is going to be particularly kind of inspiring to go and do. Good news is, and several people who've done the course or I've worked with in the clinic, they have found that by actually engaging with strength training, and again, they had to adapt their workouts initially. So rather than do one longer workout of half an hour, 40 minutes, maybe they did a couple of shorter workouts of 10 to 15 minutes where they only focus on a couple of exercises. They found that wasn't enough to kind of push their threshold into feeling completely wiped out the rest of that day. So they could do these shorter ones. And once they'd engaged with that for a few weeks, they actually found their general fatigue levels went down rather than up. But they assumed the strength training might be something that made it a lot worse, but they were going to persevere with it anyway. But actually, yeah, they found it improved as a result. Then we've got things like tendon pain. So estrogen in the body creates a nice environment for tendons to flourish. When we lose that estrogen during menopause, tendons don't react quite so quickly or as well. So if we couple that together with some of the unexpected weight gain that you might experience through menopause or as a result of menopause, we've now got more load on a tendon that isn't recovering quite as well. And actually, a lot of people then, without increased weight gain, try to do something about it. So they're then trying to do some form of jogging or other type of exercise that's putting a lot more impact through those tendons. And it's a recipe for the tendon to become very reactive and painful. Again, something that makes you not want to go back to the gym. But again, it is something that we can adapt around that pain and get you more confident with the exercises and gradually build up. And as a physio, one of the things we do with tendon type pains or tendinopathies is we try and build strength in the muscles that's associated with that tendon. And the stronger the muscle is, the more force it absorbs, the less of it gets transferred into the tendon. Then we've got symptoms of pelvic organ prolapse, bladder and bowel control. Now, if you've got the heavy dragging feeling of the symptoms that come with pelvic organ prolapse and you're fearful of your bladder or bowel control during exercise, then the desire to go and do exercise is going to be a lot lower. But again, if we look back, and there's a bit of research that shows if you were to do, or they looked at women, and the women that were lifting up to 15 kilograms, that's 15 kilograms, reported more symptoms of pelvic organ prolapse and bladder and bowel control than women who lifted over 50 kilograms. That's 50. Again, it's a common school of thought. You'd be forgiven if you thought that lifting heavy might actually make the symptoms worse because you're maybe increasing the intra-abdominal pressure and you might be more at risk of those symptoms. But this study was showing actually there were women that lifted more than 50 kilograms did much better than the women lifting 15. But if you were scared of lifting heavy, you probably put yourself in the camp of lifting a lot less, thinking you're doing the safer thing or the right thing. And actually, this is showing that lifting heavier is more protective. And as a caveat, I wouldn't suggest you go and jump in at lifting 50 kilograms straight away. We need to give the body plenty of a time to adapt, to build up to that. But it's just a point that the thing that stops people wanting to progress with strength training or even start in the first place is something that might hold you back. So it's something that will improve as a result of doing it. And the same goes with hot flashes or hot flushes. If you're suffering with hot flashes, the thought of going to do exercise where you're going to get even more hot and sweaty isn't appealing at all. However, there's a bit of a research that shows that they looked at women who did a 15-week strengthening program, and they kind of monitored the frequency of moderate to severe hot flushes that they experienced. And the frequency went down by 44% by the end of the 15 weeks of strength training. So again, the hot flashes were the things that stop people from getting started, but they're the thing that can improve. So all of this to say is I recognize that there's a lot more things that you might be able to tell me as reasons why you don't want to get started with strength training. It is going to make the starting process a lot harder than if you didn't have any of these things, and that is completely fair. But often there is a way of adapting around it, and whether we're adapting the programming as a whole or whether we're adapting the individual exercises, we can find ways of making those starting steps small enough that you have a positive experience going through this. Because if you try and do what you did in your 20s and 30s and try and take these bigger steps of progression at the start, but also during, as you've got used to it and you're trying to get to the next level, the big steps are likely to cause some kind of reaction in pain, fatigue, and the symptoms that we just talked about. Whereas if we make all those steps a lot smaller, you're a little more likely to have a positive experience. So yes, it is possible to build strength at any age. Is it going to be a bit more difficult at the start? Yes, it is, but it is possible. And I really hope it's given you some hope that you can get started with this. If you are feeling inspired to try and get started, but you're still feeling very lost with how to make those steps smaller, how to adapt and modify the exercises, and you want a bit of assistance, then I do have a free masterclass that you can go to. So it's about an hour-long masterclass, and it's going to guide you through some of the theory on how we actually go about building strength, how we might modify some of those exercises, and it's going to help build your confidence to be able to step into either a gym or your home sort of gym environment and get started with this again. So if you're interested in that, I'll put the link in the description below, but it's nevertoldtolift.com/masterclass. But for now, I hope that's inspired you. If you do have any questions ahead of next week's Q&A session, then again, please leave them in the comments below, or send me an email. So it's chris@nevertoldtolift.com. But for now, I hope you have a great week, and I will see you in that live session.